Yeah. We've learned about the UN Security Council Resolution 2231, which was part of the JCPOA. You remember it was all about the snapback sanctions and inspectors from IAEA going to Iran. And what is happening to that resolution on the part of Iran? And Iranian foreign ministry said that those days are gone, and we're not gonna. And what is the situation? Because one of the main concern right now in the United States are talking about sending inspectors in Iran and visiting those the nuclear facilities in Iran. What do we know
Iran
about
won't
that?
allow, yeah, the Iranians won't allow the International Atomic Energy Agency to inspect those sites. It's a compromised organization, and there's evidence from Israeli regime sources that it is deeply compromised, and the Israeli regime, which is not even a member, has enormous influence over the body. So they're not going to return to those sites. Again, people should not get two things confused. They may send inspectors to Tehran, to the Tehran reactor, or Bushehr, the Bushehr reactor. Iran has no problem with that, especially since in Bushehr, the Russians are working there too, and they have obligations. Those sites are there. So if tomorrow someone sees that the IAEA has sent someone to Bushehr, no one should go, oh, Iran has given concessions. No, Iran has given zero concessions. That has nothing to do with the sites that were bombed. Iran will not allow any of those sites to be monitored by the IAEA. It's just not going to happen. There has to be a final deal, and until all Iran's preconditions are met, Lebanon, Iran's assets, the sanctions, and so on and so forth, that's not going to happen. So the nuclear, remember a number of resolutions in the UN Security Council were passed against Iran in years past. And back then, China and Russia were weaker than now. So they didn't have the ability to resist. This was like 20 years ago. And I said on your show a couple of times that going to Tehran, people should read Going to Tehran by Flint and Hilary Leverett, Alistair Crook's book, Resistance. But there are also two other books that I probably mentioned, I'm not sure. One is by Peter Oborn called A Dangerous Delusion, and the other is by Gareth Porter, Manufactured Crisis. In these two last books, they go into greater detail, and to a degree in Going to Tehran, about the nuclear program and how this whole crisis started, and how the Western leaders and Western media and think tanks lied their way towards crisis. But they passed these UN resolutions against Iran. The Russians and the Chinese watered them down a bit, but they were not, they were not in the position that they are now. And when the JCPOA was signed, these sanctions were removed. And then, but the American, according to the JCPOA, if the Iranians violated the agreement and so on, they could revive these the nuclear sanctions. Russia and China did not accept. They said that Iran was abiding by its commitments, and that it was the West that violated its commitment. So, in the eyes of the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians, those UN sanctions are null and void. It's finished. It's gone. So Iran does not recognize them, neither does Russia nor China. And these are two permanent members of the UN Security Council. So for Iran, it's over.
Yeah, and it's so important right now for I don't know if because part of the MOU is talking about IAEA sanctions and the UN Security Council sanctions. These were part of this resolution?
Yes, as I said, the Iranians, the Russians, and the Chinese are saying they're null and void. But the Americans and the Europeans are saying, no, they've now been revived. So in accordance with this, they have to accept the Russian, Iranian, Chinese interpretation.
Professor Mandy, there is a so-called ceasefire in Gaza, in Lebanon, but you see the attacks are happening, as you mentioned, about Gaza. And in Lebanon, in southern part of Lebanon, in moments ago, there is a new report from Al-Mansouri in the southern part of Lebanon that Israel is attacking, using fighter jets to attack and to kill and destroy houses and, killing people. So, how do you find the situation in Lebanon, considering the latest visit of Donald Trump to Turkey, and in which he was talking with Al Jolani, the head of government in Syria, and with Turkey, with Erdogan? I don't know what is he seeking for by using the Syrian government against Lebanon, but he has something in his mind. Nobody knows. It's so vague because they're not that much talking about it. Even he was talking about sending American troops to Lebanon. It's looking at the case of Lebanon. It's some sort of chaos. Looking at not the Lebanese people, not Hezbollah. I'm talking about the policies of Washington in Lebanon, and you don't see anything solid coming out of Washington. You see talking this way, sending troops, then talking to the Syrian government, letting Netanyahu attacking the southern part of Lebanon. What is happening? Do you think, are we getting back to the war between Hezbollah and Israel?
It's quite possible. But if we do, the Iranians are going to strike the Israeli regime very hard. We're prepared for war. Nima, ever since the ceasefire, we've been preparing 24 hours a day. And the MOU has had a huge advantage for Iran in that Iran exported huge quantities of oil. They had a lot of tankers stuck in the Persian Gulf. Since they couldn't leave, they just kept pouring oil, filling up more and more tankers until they filled up all the tankers that were available. And then as soon as the MOU was signed, they sent them to Asia. Tens of millions of barrels. And of course, they imported supplies, essential goods, and that sort of thing to prepare themselves for the days and weeks and months ahead. They've been preparing for war. They've been expanding their underground missile bases, building new missiles, new drones, bringing in more high-tech capabilities into their missile systems and drone systems and anti-aircraft systems. So the Iranians are much more prepared today than they were even 4 or 5 months ago. That's not an exaggeration. Look at how better prepared Iran was for the 40-day war than it was for the 12-day war. They won the 12-day war, but look at how much better they performed in the 40-day war because they learned from their weaknesses and they built on their strengths, and that's what they're doing now. And look at the people, they're united. So Iran is very prepared for war. So if the Israeli regime ends the ceasefire, I mean, they're violating it. They murder people. They just murdered they're murdering people in the south. They murdered a school principal 3-4 days ago, a woman and her husband and their maid. And in Gaza, they're murdering people every day. You wouldn't know it if you read it in the Western media because the Western media doesn't care. Western journalists, mainstream journalists, they don't care. Western diplomats, they don't care. They don't care about these kids. They're really worthless human beings, these journalists and these diplomats. When Trump calls the Iranian scum, those who support genocide and those who have closed their eyes to genocide and those who are complicit in the genocide are scum. The Iranians and the Axis of Resistance, they're the saints. But in Turkey, it was quite astonishing that Jolani was so shameless and so weak and so pathetic and such a tool that Trump, in front of him, said, his name is Jolani. In front of him, he said, I gave the Golan Heights to Israel. It's Syrian territory, according to international law. And he said nothing. And then Trump said, the Syrians can go into Lebanon to destroy Hezbollah. And Jolani just sat there. It's pathetic. Those people who helped bring Jolani to power, those people who lied to the people about the true nature of this CIA dirty war, they're responsible for this. They pretended that this was a revolution and this was the masses and this was organic. And what is Jolani ever going to do for the Palestinian people? What is he going to do for the territory that has been lost? Nothing, because he's a tool. He was always a tool. He was their man. And then Erdogan, Trump said he's more faithful to him than other the European leaders. Is that something to be proud of? To be faithful to Trump? I mean, it's unbelievable how this man is responsible for a genocide, and then they're walking around like buddies. It's just disgusting, absolutely disgusting. But as I always, my belief. My belief is, in the long run, this is all good, because everyone has to be exposed for what they are. And ultimately, it shows that the true force of the true force that is on the side of righteousness and truth is the Axis of Resistance and its supporters across the world. And the empire and all those affiliated to it, whoever is in NATO or in our region, they're all a part of this. They're a part of this broad empire, sinister empire that does what it does. Doesn't mean that the Iranian government should break off relations with these different countries, but I'm just saying this as an Iranian citizen. I'm an ordinary Iranian citizen. I have no role to play in government. I never had any role to play in government. And I'm speaking to you online. That's my view. And that's the view of so many people in this part of the world. But Trump has no strategy for Lebanon. He has no strategy for the Persian Gulf. And Iran will not allow the Israeli regime to remain in Lebanon. I mean, Iran will not allow Trump to allow the Israeli regime to stay in Lebanon. There is no way in the world that the Strait of Hormuz will normalize as long as the occupation in Lebanon continues. And also, Iran will deal with the Palestinian issue as it always has. It will continue to support them, and it will also put pressure on the United States when it comes to Gaza. But right now, we have very fundamental issues to deal with right now, and that is the violation of every aspect of the deal except for the siege. And as I said, many people are saying, well, look, Iran is showing weakness. No, it isn't. Iran is making the Strait of Hormuz smaller. The more the Americans violate the deal, in Persian, tange, that would be more of a tange tangtar. So
Yeah. It's going to be narrower.
The narrow, because it's tange is like the narrow, it will become more narrow. So the more the Americans violate the deal, the more narrow the strait becomes.
Yeah. Professor Marandi, there is a report, a joint investigation by Der Spiegel, The Insider, and Le Monde. And they're talking about an extensive secret military cooperation between Russia and China, including discussions on countering Western weapons, disrupting Starlink, which was part of the operation against Iran, and training Russian drone operators, and jointly developing advanced missile defense systems. And they call this the new axis of evil. As the old axis of evil, you are the old axis of evil, and we have the new axis of evil. How do you feel about the new axis of evil?
I think that's unfair. I mean, we were evil first, and we will remain at the top of the chart. No one can replace us. We are the axis of evil, and whatever they want to do, they come after us. But these people, they are the ones who are supporting genocide, and they're talking about evil.
Yeah.
I mean,
It
It's
means that
just
they have to attack you, but you have to have no capabilities to defend yourself. If you do something, you are the evil.
Did you see that interview that woman carried out with me on Australian ABC TV?
Yeah, I saw that.
That,
The clip.
the utter arrogance of these people, the shamelessness. They have no shame, no shame at all. They're just utterly shameless. I mean, but so yeah, I mean, good for the Russians and the Chinese. I hope Iran joins and gets some of that technology and invests in that technology too. The Europeans and the Americans are not the good guys; they're the bad guys, and they're the enemies of the global majority, and they're the enemies of their own people. They are basically sacrificing their own people for an oligarchy that does not have the interests of anyone at heart. They don't have the interests of the people of the United States or the Europeans at heart. And so, yeah, I mean, I haven't seen. I mean, how many countries has China invaded over the last like 20 years? So who is the United States or who are the Europeans to talk about evil? They're the heart of darkness.
Yeah.
And I mean the elites, of course, because we know that people
Yeah.
across Europe and the United States, and Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists, and Hindus, so many people, so many young people are turning against this. It's so, whenever I say the Europeans, the Americans, I'm being very clearly specific. I'm talking specifically about the oligarchy, the Epstein class, the Zionists, whatever you want to call it. But it's just them.